The reverse double spey is going to be the cast that we use when we're on the left side of the river and we've got a downstream breeze. So we're going to create our D-loop on the downstream side of our body. On the reverse double spey, you want to start with your feet pointing across the river, turn your torso, and think about your left hand on your left hip with the rod tip pointing straight down below you. At this point, our fly line should be straight in line with the rod. So our first goal is to place the anchor. And just like in all the other casts, our general rule of thumb is consistent. So we want to try to get that fly to land somewhere out here about a rod length away at about a 45-degree angle. This is a little bit of a tricky anchor because you have to actually hop the anchor up to you to get it in the right spot. And it's a two-part move to do so. The first part is a vertical lift with the rod tip and then a declining plane as you sweep upstream, ending your rod completely pointing upriver. Vertical lift up, declining plane. The trick of this is we're trying to get that fly to jump out of the water and land right where we want. So it really helps to actually watch your fly come out of the water when you do this. It'll help you kind of decipher how much power you really need. So the next little challenge in this anchor setup, if you remember the 3 rules of the anchor, we've talked about the fly needs to be in the right spot. We need to try to get this nice straight line as our second goal, and then we're going to try to get that little loop of line. So in order to get this thing to lay out completely straight in front of us, it's all about the angle of your drop. So as you lift, as you drop the rod down to the water, that angle is going to really dictate how smoothly that lands on the water. So if that angle is too parallel to the water and it doesn't drop enough, my fly is probably going to go upstream from me. It's much more difficult to actually get it to land right where we want it. If that angle is too steep, in other words, I drop too fast, a lot of times I end up with a lot of slack on the water. So the key is finding that perfect angle as you drop to get that anchor to land in a perfectly straight line. That takes a little bit of practice, and as a drill, you can just set your anchor, roll cast back downstream, set your anchor, roll cast back downstream. Remember, the anchor is the most important part of the entire setup. If it starts right, your chances of finishing right are that much better. So the last element in the anchor setup is really thinking about that little upstream loop that we've been talking about, the ripping loop. You know, when you do a snap tee, the current actually helps pull that loop into the line. That's why people love to do snap tees. With a double spey, it's a little bit more difficult because your power application with the rod tip has to form that loop above you. So just to review in the anchor, the 3 principles, fly placement, straight line, ripping loop, they all apply. The last thing I want you to think about with your anchor again is where that line lands in relationship to your body. Our baseline that we've tried to create in this video is that should land about a foot to a foot inside of your rod tip if you extend your rod straight out. This is all controlled by how vertical you lift before you start to sweep. So if I lift to about a 45-degree angle and then I make my sweep upriver, that will be a pretty good all-around setup, just about a foot inside of it. Now watch what happens when I lift more vertical. In other words, I lifted to about 45 and sweep, now I'm going almost totally vertical and then sweeping. Look at how close the anchor landed to me. On the other side of that is if I only lift to maybe 20 degrees and now I sweep, see how the anchor jumps outside of my rod tip? All of these different anchor sets are going to be useful down the road. In the next disc, I'm going to show you how to change your anchor for the fishing situations. But as a baseline, just practice getting that anchor landing consistently in that spot, just about a foot inside of the rod tip. Once you've set your anchor, now you're ready to move on to your D-loop. We're going to use the same principle of a flat plane. So we're going to make a vertical lift, sweep out and around into the flat plane, really focusing on getting the energy of the D-loop going into the 180-degree plane. Take a closer look at what my hands are doing. After I lift to my D-loop plane, my top hand starts moving out over the river in a circular motion to create the sweep of the D-loop. As my top hand reaches the left side of my body, my bottom hand continues to drive the rod around the D-loop plane and into the firing position. You know, the 180-degree rule, and that is if our cast is going to go that way, it needs to line up with our fly and our D-loop. Everything lines up. That is one of the most important fundamentals in spey casting. In order to do that, along this flat plane, we're going to think about our power application happening very late. Really, if you think about this imaginary line from the target to the fly and beyond, as your rod tip gets to that point on that line, that's where your acceleration happens. So as you sweep along, right over my anchor is where I'm going to accelerate to get my D-loop to jump back here. If I accelerate too early, now all the power is going to be going downstream. If I accelerate too late, I might wrap my rod tip around my head. So it helps sometimes to watch your D-loop. Some people find it very helpful to actually watch their D-loop go behind them. But if you do, just be very, very aware that your shoulders don't turn. In other words, once you make your setup, you lift, accelerate around, keep your shoulders pointing at your target. It's okay to look back there, but just make sure not to open up your casting stroke. So let's put that all together. We're going to make a vertical lift, jump our anchor up to us, lift to the plane, sweep around, and accelerate into the D-loop. As I move into my forward cast in the reverse double, I'm going to come around into my firing position, compress my D-loop. I'm going to think about the rod moving forward and slightly down, and when I get to about noon, that's where my power application is going to happen. Just remember those three fundamentals: straight rod tip path, smooth acceleration with a late power application, and then just stop that rod with your top hand. Those will all help you form a little tighter loop. Let's cover a few of the common errors in a reverse double spey. One of the things I see a lot of people do is when they're making their anchor setup, they actually turn their head and look upriver. If you're looking upriver, you can't see where your anchor needs to land. And again, you're taking the hand out of hand-eye coordination. So just make sure as you're making your setup, watch that fly come out of the water. It'll really help you put it in the right spot consistently. The second mistake is just lifting too fast, and you're probably noticing this common theme in just about every cast. I really think about starting as smooth and as slow as I can to set my anchor. Just remember, it's always easier to add gas, but once you start going fast, you've got to continue to go fast. So just start smooth and easy. If you start too fast, now that rod loads up. When that fly leaves the water, it's going to spring way upriver and you're not going to have any control over your anchor. Another real common mistake here is not jumping the anchor up to you or not making that little controlled hop. In other words, you're just sort of dragging the fly up to you, trying to get it into place. And what inevitably ends up happening to most people is they kind of wrap the line around them. They don't get the ripping loop. They don't get the line out in front of them. You can see my anchor ended up right at my feet. So just to review, make sure that as you set this anchor, you're using enough power application to hop that fly out. That lift is really popping the fly out, and then the power application with your bottom hand is what's helping you hop it up to you. Another very common error that we see quite a bit in this cast is just starting too fast into your D-loop. You lift, you put the acceleration too early, and now the D-loop is tracking this way. And especially with these reverse shoulder casts, this is a big problem. We talked about it a little bit in the kind of the instructional part of this cast, but just remember, always start smooth and slow and think about directing that energy of the D-loop into the 180-degree plane. Another thing to watch out for is just turning your shoulders into your cast. One of the things that I've found is that a lot of people actually do better on their off shoulder because you can't open up your casting stroke like you can when you're doing, your strong shoulder. If you're in the correct firing position, you can't open up your casting stroke. But you can if you turn your shoulders. So watch this cast. I'm gonna turn my shoulders into my D-loop as I turn around, and now all my core energy is facing this way. So the solution is just remember to keep your shoulders always pointing towards your target. That'll really help you not only get the D-loop going in the right direction, but it'll help your rod tip track in a straight line as you make your forward cast. Not to mention, it's going to just help keep the energy in the cast. I feel like if you turn, a lot of times you're almost losing the tension in the D-loop. So keep those shoulders square right at your target. If you're a left-handed caster, your start position is going to be slightly different. Start with your feet pointing towards your target, and you're going to start again with the rod tip near the water surface, but the rod's going to be in kind of a neutral position in front of you. You're going to make your vertical lift and simply just cross your hands to set your anchor. From that point, you're going to lift, sweep around the D-loop, make your cast.